Back with the next module, and we're going to be jumping into compression. The three main controls, which is threshold, ratio, and makeup gain. Before we dive into it though, I just kind of want to emphasize the importance of compression and what it actually is, because I think a lot of us are out there throwing the plug-in on our track, but not necessarily realizing what is actually going on. Like, why do we compress? We're taking peaks such as these, and if you notice while they're playing,
resonance, crack the caster, copy molding, lower vibes, your way of sub, cheesy and baloney.
You'll notice that every time a stronger peak comes through, that's like noticeably bigger, like that.
Resonance, crack the caster, copy molding.
The volume is hitting a lot higher. On average, this is hitting around -9, but you can see that peak brought it up to like -5.4. So what we're doing with compression is we're setting a threshold at a specific area so that it basically tucks that peak back down to be more even and consistent with the rest of everything else that's in the track. Let's get into it. First and foremost, we already did EQ on the last mod, so we're going to jump in and we're going to open up just a basic compressor. All of this I'm going to do isolated throughout the tutorial, just because it's a lot easier for you to actually hear what it is that I'm applying within the chain and within the the mix down. But it's really good practice to always be referencing, and if not always doing this in combination with the instrumental layers playing. And that's because you're going to get a better feel of how everything can come together. But for the simplicity of showing you and demonstrating what's actually going down, I'm just going to go ahead and isolate the vocal out, and we'll maybe jump back and forth with the instrumental. Let's just go ahead and let it play.
Resonance, crack the caster, copy molding, lower vibes, your way of sub, cheesy and baloney.
All right, so as you can see, we have the threshold here, we've got the ratio, and we've got makeup gain. Now the ratio right now is set to 2.1 to 1, or we'll just put it to 2 to 1 to make it easier figure. So what that's saying is that every time 2 decibels is past a -16.5 decibel range, 1 dB is going to be taken away. But it's allowing some of it to come through, but it's just reducing some of it as well. Go ahead and let it play and watch what happens.
Resonance, crack the caster, copy molding, lower vibes, your way of sub, cheesy and baloney.
If you can aim to do about 6 dB in reduction, if you don't already have something that's like really compressed, then you're going to find that you're getting a lot more balance within your overall take. I would just stick with the 2 to 1 ratio to start, but let's go ahead and let it fluctuate because it can vary case by case. I do want you to get used to knowing that, it's more about adapting these rules of thumb to different scenarios. So let's go ahead and just take it off completely.
Resonance, crack the caster, copy molding.
And I'm going to slowly introduce a lower threshold.
Resonance, crack the caster, copy molding, lower vibes, your way of sub, cheesy and baloney.
So you notice it's about that -18 mark that you can actually audibly hear that there's an effect being had. And a good rule of thumb with this, and actually every other part of the mixdown process, mess around with knobs until you notice a difference and then just back off of it slightly. And what that's going to do is it's not going to take any of the natural elements out of their original presentation, but it's going to tighten them up to be more consistent with where the general area is that they sound good. And then another good rule of thumb is you notice this needle is coming back, but it's not staying on that -6 zone. Sometimes it's going past it, which is perfectly fine, but it's bouncing, it's dancing. And ideally, you want it coming back to that 0 point. What that is allowing to do is it's not over compressing and just holding everything at a lower level, but it's actually allowing everything to breathe and still have its dynamic feel, its dynamic dance, the dynamic shift between the low and high expression of the waveform. And you don't want to get rid of that because that's what makes the sound. So then we get to makeup gain. Since you're setting a threshold and you're bringing the levels down, bringing the higher peaks so that they're more consistent even with the rest of everything going on, that's going to then allow you more headroom. Whereas before, when you just raise the volume on it, you would be raising the high peaks higher, and then you'd be getting those low peaks higher, but they still wouldn't be competing with the high peaks. But since you're compressing it, you're keeping all of your levels more consistent while maintaining the dynamic range. And then you're raising that whole thing together. So that's what gives that fullness. That's what gives that full effect. It makes you feel like, wow, it's loud now. And it is loud, but it's not actually louder. Sometimes people could be having louder tracks because their peaks are actually technically hitting louder, but the fullness is lacking. We're aiming for perceived loudness, which is actually fullness. And compression is one of the key elements or the key tools that gets you there. So if you're noticing that, hey, before I do anything, and you could just turn it off to notice
Resonance will crack the cast the copy molding.
We can see that -6 is a little bit more of like the roof or the ceiling that it's hitting around, with a 2-to-1 ratio and a threshold backing down.
Resonance will
to like
crack the cast
dB.
the copy molding. Lower vibes, your way of sub, cheesy and baloney.
Now we can see that like -12 dB is more of where the ceiling is. This comes down in the style, but general rule of thumb, that means you can raise it back 3 to 6 dB. So we'll go ahead and just listen to it, let it play, and then slowly introduce the mix.
Resonance will crack the cast the copy molding. Lower vibes, your way of sub, cheesy and baloney. Ripping filters off, zigzag and smoke them like a rollie.
So that 6 dB added back in sounded brilliant. Go ahead and let it play with the instrumental. So this is before compression.
Crack the cast the copy molding. Lower vibes, your way of sub.
This is with compression with the threshold and ratio set.
Resonance will crack the cast the copy
And
molding.
then this is going to reintroduce makeup gain.
Resonance will crack the cast the copy molding. Lower vibes, your way of sub, cheesy and baloney.
Now you can almost hear that it's like in a pocket. It's in its spot. The reason that it sounds like that is because, number one, we carved out the low end with the EQ. We kind of boosted that high end around 2K. And then we went back in and we compressed it. So what we're doing is we're taking all of the ideal aspects of our recording and we're chiseling down to where that's what's left, or that's what's most emphasized. Pretty much covers compression. As far as attack, release, just lightly, I'm not going to get too deep into the sauce with it. The speed at which it begins to take effect from the moment that it's triggered is the attack. So you could think of like when something attacks, when something begins. Fast attack means that it's instantly going to take effect based on how it's set. A slower attack means that it's going to let the onset of the transient or the waveform do its thing before it begins engaging. And that can sometimes work really well, especially if you still want some of the to really come through on the vocal, have its first initial hit before it begins compressing. That's really good for that. And then release, just like it sounds, how fast or slow the effect of the compression is let go once it's applied. So that wraps it up for compression. We're going to come back in with part 6, how to set up your bus. We're going to be doing that with effects so that we can get some kind of glue. I will show you when we hop in there how we can really actually use it for more than just that. See you in the next module.
Want to get even more out of your mixing journey? Discover tailored mentorship, proven plug-and-play presets, and build mindset for continual growth long after our sessions. Book your free call today and elevate your sound with Vocal Mix Express.